Your Excellency, Eyo Wiwa, Eyo Treasure Basoko, Ostalos.
Mazidizeni, Vamba Mazidizeni, Mazidizeni, Vamba Mazidizeni, Mazidizeni, Vamba Mazidizeni, Mazidizeni, Vamba Mazidizeni. Yellow, 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 yellow. Zinuruma 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 yellow. Simuka, simuka, simuka tiwanye. Chikunwe chese kujenga so. Eyo wallet, Vice President. Eyo Marco, eyo Obey Stolen. Simuka. Kudi jo. Eyo Amos Sibaya. Famba. Makuja kunyepa vano chikunda. Presena vaona vama kufunda. Mazidizeni yese kubuda. Muzimba zavo kakunuvota. Paika ya kuti vachatimisa. Pavakadzinga vachamisa. Manje yelo yashamisa. Mazidizeni kunuvota. Mazidizeni vamba mazidizeni. 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 Mazidizeni vamba number one. Yellow, 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 yellow. Zinuruma yellow, 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 yellow. Zinuruma yellow, 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 yellow.
This is Letter from America. Today's topic is the corrupt ZANU PF regime cannot account for looted 25 billion US dollars of taxpayers' money. According to the Zimbabwe's Auditor General's report for 2020, the ZANU PF regime cannot account for or overspent by 102 Zimbabwean billion dollars or $25 billion in US currency. Describing the auditor's report, former Finance Minister Tendai Biti said it was shocking to learn of such massive unaccounted for or overspent money by the ministries. In an obvious reference to corruption, this corrupt pattern of missing taxpayers' money has been going on since 2013, he said. Zimbabwe now has a parallel government that is spending money without accounting for it. BT said this parallel government is spending money that has not been approved or authorized by Parliament. Describing ZANU PF culture of impunities, endemic corruption, BT said taxpayers' money has been missing in increasing quantities each year. In 2017, ZANU PF could not account for 2.7 billion US dollars. In 2018, ZANU PF could not account for 3.5 billion US dollars. In 2019, ZANU PF could not account for 6.9 billion US dollars. and in 2020, ZANU PF could not account for 102 billion Zimbabwean dollars, or about 25 billion US dollars. To make matters worse, the ZANU PF regime has totally ignored the concerns and complaints by the Auditor General Mildred Shiri. BT said ZANU PF does not pay attention to the AG's report and concerns. Instead, the budget for the Auditor General's office has been significantly reduced. The AG's office, that is Auditor General's office, is underfunded. It has a brain drain, lacks resources, does not have modern software she needs. Her reports are gathering dust, completely ignored. One ZANU PF minister once suggested that the office of the Auditor General should be shut down. Vice President Chiwengwa is on record as suggesting that the powers of the Auditor General be reduced. In 2019, BT said the Auditor General found discrepancies and irregularities in about 50% of all ministerial accounts. The irony here was ministries were underfunded by $150 million, but the budget performed to only 36%. If ministries were underfunded by 64% and government overspent by 102 billion Zimbabwean dollars more, where did this money go? BT suggested that all this unaccounted for money was being used by a shadowy parallel government to fund illicit projects in command agriculture and mining. BT noted that the Auditor General's report could not verify some of the government expenditures because there was no record of what had been paid for. In some cases, payment vouchers were different for expenditures that were authorized under the line item budget. BT said when he was finance minister back in 2008, 2009, he set up a public finance management software under a grant from the African Development Bank. This system kept detailed track of government revenue and expenditures. The financial management system made it impossible to steal a penny from government, BT said. But it has now been destroyed, and ZANU PF can steal directly from government, he added. There are many cases where government has paid for goods or services which were not delivered. One remarkable example of corruption in 2017 was when government bought 4 planes from Malaysia, but one of the planes disappeared, even though it had been fully paid for. The worst part of it is government refuses to investigate the missing monies. The Auditor General is reported to be very frustrated because every year she reports missing monies or unauthorized expenditures, but nothing happens after this. BT said Zimbabwean citizens must be angry, but they do not seem to have a capacity to be angry and assert themselves. Zimbabweans are a weak society with no capacity to take decisive action against corruption. Zimbabweans are not playing roles. They are unlike citizens in South Africa, Zambia, Kenya, Malawi, Ghana, where such news of corruption would have sent thousands of protesting citizens in the streets. BT said the Auditor General was very frustrated. She is under siege from ZANU looters. Where is civic society in this? BT raised this question. The Auditor General's report that shows massive looting of public money by ZANU PF is the latest in a series of reports of rampant looting by ZANU PF. The widely reported Pomona scandal and the city of Harare last year handed over for free the Pomona dam site to George Nix BV, a shadowy company blacklisted in Europe. The company is expected to turn the West into energy. It will be paid at least 22,000 US dollars a day and 14,600,000 US dollars a year, translating to more than 344 million US dollars for 30 years, according to the contract already working. The other scandal is the unauthorized deal on fire tenders. Each fire tender is being purchased at a value of 464,296 US dollars, translating to 55 million US dollars for 89 local authorities that are specified. Research has since established that the prices were inflated in a great deal of corruption controversy. The question, where is the public on this runaway corruption, now focuses on what the Zimbabweans will do. Will the Zimbabweans sit idly by while ZANU PF squanders taxpayers' funds in such an extravagant manner? Is there any will among Zimbabweans to stand up and fight for their rights and their resources, which are being mercilessly squandered by ZANU PF? Are Zimbabweans aware that they have the power in numbers to bring down the ZANU PF regime through mass protests? Do Zimbabweans really need to be educated that they are suffering and should not allow the ZANU PF regime to continue oppressing them? Do they really need to be educated on that? There is, however, some slim hope that Zimbabweans are slowly rising up against ZANU PF. The opposition Triple T, which was born in February this year, has made extraordinary gains in by-elections. The political tidal wave against ZANU PF is fast becoming a reality to ZANU PF. This is even though ZANU PF has used unlimited quantities of state resources to bribe voters. ZANU PF is the only political party that can dip into the national treasury and use taxpayers' money to promote its own propaganda. Reports from around the country point to a massive frustration with the ZANU PF. Rural people are waking up to speak out loudly against ZANU PF. At a meeting between rural people and ZANU PF officials, these officials could not answer a simple question. Why are you moving us from our ancestral lands and giving this land to the Chinese? The only answer the puzzled officials could give was Pamberine ZANU, Pamberine Kubatana, Pasine Mandu. forward with ZANU, unity, and down with enemies. In the past, ZANU relied on its threats to use force to keep rural people from opposing the party. They used the ZANU Ndeye Ropa mantra to frighten rural people, telling them that if ZANU PF lost any election, they would use violence to terrorize the villagers. There were occasions where the ZANU PF officials showed up with guns to show they meant what they said about violence. ZANU PF has been comfortable of winning rural votes since independence. The difference, of course, is in Matabeleland, where the rural citizens have remained staunchly anti-ZANU PF. In the 1985 general elections, and at the height of the Gukura Hundi Holocaust, where the 5th Brigade massacred more than 20,000 citizens, ZANU PF was confident it had frightened people enough for them to vote for the party. ZANU PF hardliner, the late Innocent Kala, spoke confidently of his party winning more than 70% of the Matabele vote. But the result was a massive defeat for ZANU PF. ZAPU, led by Joshua Ngomo, won all the 15 seats for Matabeleland. Nkala lost his seat in Filabusi. He was humiliated, very humiliated. Matabeleland set the trend and model for defying ZANU PF. They had been under siege from the 5th Brigade, which was given blanket permission to torture, kill, abduct, or rape anyone to their pleasure. The commander of the 5th Brigade, the late Perence Shiri, openly boasted that he was under direct command of then Prime Minister Mugabe. Shiri claimed he had absolute freedom to do whatever he wanted in Matabeleland. Between 1983 and 1987, the people of Matabeleland lived under a military dictatorship of the 5th Brigade led by Shiri. Gangs of 5th Brigade soldiers went on a rampage against the people of Matabeleland, whom they forced to, among other things, to buy ZANU party cards. If no one did not have a party card, innocent civilians were simply bayoneted to death at the worst. What followed was a mad rush by the citizens to buy ZANU party card. The ZANU offices in Bulawayo had a very difficult time meeting the sudden and massive demands for cards. There was no accountability for the money, and ZANU officials enriched themselves by pocketing thousands of dollars. At that time, the Zimbabwean dollar was very strong and almost 1-to-1 with the US dollar. Party officials who ventured deep into rural Matabeleland drove back to Bulawayo in the ironic fear for their lives from the 5th Brigade soldiers who had absolute power to stop and search anyone. These soldiers had taken in heavy doses of marijuana supplied by government to dull their senses when it came to killing innocent civilians. One ZANU official said the 5th Brigade soldiers were so intoxicated with the drugs that they could kill anyone. By killing anyone, I mean it did not matter that you were a ZANU official. It also did not matter that you had a membership card or other identifying document. Mugabe had created monsters in the 5th Brigade. And these monsters were on the loose in Matabeleland, consuming anyone, anything they wanted, said this former ZANU official. One widely publicized case was an army officer based in Hwange under the 4th Brigade that was led at the time by Brigadier Chinenge, now Chiwenga. This officer was on an authorized leave. He was driving to Bulawayo to visit his parents and relatives. At the Lupane military checkpoint controlled by the 5th Brigade, he showed his leave papers and other documents that identified him as commander of the 4th Brigade Army Unit based in Hwange. The drunk 5th Brigade soldiers looked at his leave pass, noticed he had a Ndebele name, and forced him into the nearby bush. They shot him dead for no reason other than he had a Ndebele name. On hearing this, Brigadier Chinenge in Bulawayo was furious and had an open confrontation with Shiri. If ZANU officials who drove deep into Matabeleland to collect money for the party cards drove back to Bulawayo before sunset for fear of 5th Brigade animals, how about the civilians who lived in those deep, isolated rural areas? The historic pattern of settlement in rural Matabeleland is different from rural Mashonaland. People in Mashonaland lived and still live in clusters for collective security. It is believed this was for collective security arising from Matabele raids in the late 1800s under King Lobengula. But people in Matabeleland have historically lived in isolated family units. The most important takeaway from the Gukuraundi experience in Matabeleland is the resilience people of Matabeleland showed in the face of the brutal military rule. They were brave enough to vote massively against ZANU PF at the elections, especially in 1985. Their story, that is the innocent, the civilians of Matabeleland, and their bravery, their story must be told and retold to future generations on their remarkable display of profiles of courage. To say public opinion in Zimbabwe is dramatically swinging against ZANU PF is an understatement of the century. The country's changing demographics are bringing in a new post-colonial generation that in many cases, is openly defying ZANU PF. According to the United Nations Population Fund, country representative Esther Muia, Zimbabwe's population has doubled since independence 42 years ago, and the population is expected to double again to 30 million by 2030. Two significant factors in the population figures include there are more females than men in the country. This should strengthen gender representation in public sectors and ministries, or at least the fight for a more equitable gender representation. The rural population declined from 67% to 61.4%. The urban population rose from 33% in 2012 to 38.6% in 2020. About 70% of the population is under 40 years of age. These factors have combined, and they point to a more urbanized, youthful population that ZANU PF will find very difficult to control. ZANU PF feels its image has been tarnished and needs to be corrected. ZANU PF is appealing to SADC leaders to help correct this negative image. But President Kagame of Rwanda made some insightful comments about attempts by the ZANU PF regime to change what the ruling party viewed as negative perceptions about Zimbabwe. President Kagame said before Zimbabwean authorities can change negative international perceptions about the country, they must first convince their own citizens about those negative perceptions. To convince people, you must show that people are benefiting. You must build on tangible things. If the country is hungry and the world says that people are hungry, you cannot condemn the world for telling the truth, President Kagame said. In other words, ZANU PF is lobbying Africa and the international community in a futile attempt to change negative perceptions about the way it is treating Zimbabweans. It is reported that ZANU PF is paying a US-based public relations company about $500,000 to help change the image, the negative image about the country. But as President Kagame advised, that negative image reflects the truth about what is happening in the country. Corruption is at an all-time high. Basic human rights have been completely destroyed or scuttled. ZANU PF is using violence to oppress the citizens of Zimbabwe. Opposition supporters are languishing in jail on trumped-up charges. All these criminal activities by ZANU PF are what is leading to negative perceptions about Zimbabwe. President Kagame is challenging ZANU PF to show that ZANU PF respects the rule of law, ZANU PF respects freedom of the press and expression, to show that ZANU PF upholds the basic principles of the Constitution, that it respects freedom of association, that it is against politically motivated violence, that ZANU PF punishes criminals regardless of their political association. And if ZANU PF fails to show human rights, then the negative perceptions about the country are true. More specifically, if ZANU PF fails to show that it respects all those aspects of basic human rights, then the negative perceptions from the whole world, from the region, from the international press cannot be lies. They are true, as Paul Kagame said.
This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening.
Simon